Hi, this is Jack Stanley. And 1 year ago, I sat right here and talked about the conflict in Ukraine and my concerns over the fact that if it is not handled and not mediated quickly, it could expand greatly and then turn into something we could really wish we did not see, requiring prudent negotiation and prudent deliberation on finding ways of solving the conflict rather than escalating it. Well, a year has gone by, and the situation has turned into an ugly fissure. No longer do we hear great drives of pushing for peace, but we keep hearing of more and more weapons being sent. We hear of more and more attempts to continue this terrible, terrible conflict. As I said initially, 1 year ago, I disagree with Russia's invasion, but I understand their reaction, which is something that's not talked about very often. We have to remember that Ukraine is on Russia's border and that NATO has been pushing to create more NATO states and right on the border of Russia. And that the ideology between those states in NATO and Russia are fundamentally opposed in many respects. So the issue and the battles that are going on, which have been terrible and deadly, I mean, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of dead and wounded at this point. And also the explosion of the gas line between Russia and Germany. There was more recently a famous investigative reporter, Seymour Hersh, wrote a whole piece on how the United States was involved in the destruction of that pipeline. Now, of course, the United States was saying it had no indication or knowledge of anything happening in that pipeline. Now, here's the interesting thing. Just today, just looking at what was in the New York Times, there's an article from intelligence saying that it was a pro-Ukrainian group that destroyed the pipeline. Now, if we want to go that route, we have to ask, how did they acquire the financing, the equipment? Because it required a great deal of work to do what needed to be done. And if the United States is stating that it had really very little knowledge of this taking place, and Zelensky in the Ukraine had little knowledge of what was taking place, who is running things? What is going on? Because basically, I don't believe that story. I believe that is a cover piece. I believe that the United States is far more in bed with what is going on in the Ukraine than they are willing to admit. And great deals of money and weaponry has been sent to the Ukraine. This issue, the Ukraine, is causing a great deal of trouble internationally with many countries. Of course, we see China in the fray. As I said a year ago, China is clandestinely doing things with Russia. It's now known that that is true, and always has been. But what has happened now is that China is taking advantage of the situation and pushing the United States, telling it to cool off, or you're facing possible conflict with China. I mean, there's so much going on here that somebody needs to hit the brakes. Because if the brakes are not hit, it will turn into an international conflict. It has all the makings of it. We have all of the alliances. As I said before, remember how World War I started? By alliances. NATO is one big monster alliance. If part of NATO is attacked, all of NATO is attacked. Does anybody really realize how dangerous this situation is? And is anyone really pushing very hard to find a way to get us out of it? Because that's what we need to do. We need to be out of Ukraine. We cannot be the world's guardian all the time. We need to start taking care of ourselves a little bit. Do you realize that our bridges are all falling apart and our infrastructure is in dangerous condition? I mean, this is nothing new. It's been going on for 25, 30 years. But think about $50 billion being sent, and $50 billion sent again of materials and this, that, and everything else. Just imagine if that had been used in the United States to fix our infrastructure. Maybe we need to declare war on infrastructure. And maybe then we can repair things in the country that seriously need repair, and perhaps get our nose out of other countries. You know, we can't constantly be the guardian of the world. And in our desire to do so, we will end up being loathed by many in the world. These are dangerous times. Far more dangerous than any of the news media is making out. Far more dangerous than what we really understand. Because much of the news that's taking place in the Ukraine is not being talked about. Contact people in Europe and find out what's going on. Take a look at our news here in the United States, and you'll see things that are quite different. Ukraine is not doing that great. It's in a serious situation. They have lost a tremendous amount of their military force. And Zelensky keeps mentioning that maybe the United States should send soldiers. No. No. The minute we send soldiers, we're going to start an irreversible action that will cause a world conflict. Mark my words. I tell you this now. I've studied history all my life, and I've watched how things have happened. And the human race is extremely simple in many respects. We constantly do the same things over and over again. I can smell war. That's how powerful this is. What we need to do is stop, think, like a railroad crossing. Stop, look, and listen. Because, once again, just to end this, if we do not stop this, if we do not put the brakes on this, or find one way or another to have some prudent mediation, this is going to blow up in everyone's face. It has all the markings for it. Wanted to say this on this date, March the 7th, 2023. I fear what the world may be looking at 1 year from today. Thank you.